And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore. We never sit out. We're your hosts, MD and CD today. I'm recapping, sadly, it was the last week of the regular season for college football in the year of 2024. We've got a conference championship matches set. We've got look ahead bowl games. We've got coaches getting fired out of the wazoo, coaches leaving their jobs for coordinator, Power 5 coaches leaving for coordinator jobs. We got a lot to talk about this week. But as always, if you guys like the content, like the video, very simple rule that we have here, we would appreciate that so much. And consider subscribing as we're about to get into some crazy postseason and off-season coverage with bowl games, conference championships, college football playoffs, coaching carousel, transfer portal. There is so much still to happen this year. So, CD, how are you feeling after this weekend?
Holy cow. I mean, we always talk about this being the best week of sports, maybe of the year, and it did not disappoint, especially in college football. It started all the way back on Thursday with Memphis taking it to Tulane. Obviously, Friday got the headline with Georgia going down to the wire there in 8 overtimes. Count them, 8 overtimes. Still a terrible way to decide a college football game. I get it from the entertainment and the time aspect. I get that. However, I still didn't love it. But regardless, Saturday also start to finish was fantastic. I know we had a good time down there in College Station as much as we could. But yeah, I mean, you said it. There's so much going on right now in college football. Make sure to stay tuned. Make sure to follow us on Twitter because we are not done. We have a lot to talk about in December and January. And we get into the off season, it's going to be awesome. And by the way, signing day. I don't know if you mentioned that. Signing day is on Wednesday too. So just to throw that all in the
Yeah,
midst of it, we got flip season upon us. We have a lot going on.
you said it. I mean, first off, do we want to briefly touch on some interesting coaching moves before we head into, talking about some of the games that we didn't preview or talk about in the best bets or dirty dogs?
I mean, we can barely do that. I know we'll really deep dive into every single coaching change that there
Absolutely.
is. So if we do kind of skimp over stuff, we will have a full deep dive in terms of our thoughts, meanings, everything else in terms of that. But I guess on the coordinator side, real quick, I think a big one here is Tim DeRuyter gone from Texas Tech. I know that's the guy that you like, defensive coordinator there,
Yeah.
former Oregon kid or Oregon coach as well, and then Tony White and Terrence Knighton, two of the better position and defensive coaches in college football, are going to Florida State. Florida State's making big moves as their offensive coordinator is going to be Gus Malzahn, trying the Chip Kelly route that Ohio State tried and maybe not successfully. But listen, I think Malzahn, I like that fit for them, and Tony White, obviously, along with a great recruiter and Terrence Knighton as well. So, yeah, Florida State, obviously the 2-10 year, but they got the resources, they got the money to buy in. They're not messing around. They're giving Mike Norvell everything he needs to succeed because they have a lot to work on, not only in the portal, but also trying to stitch together what's left of their recruiting class.
Absolutely. And then you look at head coaching spots. I know you already mentioned Gus Malzahn, but uh, North Carolina, UCF, West Virginia, Purdue, Fresno State. That kind of happened, before the season started, right? With his health concerns. Sean Clark at App State is out. We talked about Blake Carroll getting the job at East Carolina over Mike Houston, who got fired earlier this year. Uh, Tom Herman, Will Hall, Blake Anderson. Obviously, that happened before the season. Title
Long
IX
time ago.
violations. Kevin Wilson. If I mean, this list is getting long, man. I mean, Casey Keeler moving
Yep.
for a coordinator job, head coach at Sam Houston State. I mean,
Oh,
there's a
I
lot
thought
more.
he's going to be the coordinator there.
Oh, sorry, head coach at Temple. Sorry, that's a little bit of a missay right there. But yeah, that's only part of the moving pieces in the cogs. That is which is the coaching carousel that we know is going to get crazy. But I guess we'll get out of that for right now. Before we head into our Dirty Dogs recap and our best bets and the games that we previewed, the eight of which we chose to preview, which ended up all being pretty decent games. What games were you looking at this rivalry weekend that we maybe didn't touch on before?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll say, I mean, I'll start with the low hanging fruit there and Michigan and Ohio State. We talked
Yeah,
briefly, and I thought about, previewing it in terms of like what it could mean. And obviously, it's a big game, the rivalry. I get that, but I just didn't see it was a very narrow path to Michigan winning that football game, and it's exactly how it played out. Although they didn't play perfect at all, they struggled in the red zone. They threw turnovers. Davis Warren had 62 yards passing, and outside of a couple runs there, they did not get much going at all from Mullings and Orgy. But I don't even know, man. I mean, at this point, I'm not on the fire Ryan Day train at all. I think you lose games. Like he's lost a lot of, like some games, very little games in his tenure there, and a lot of them have been to really, really good football games in maybe close games or whatever. This one hurts more than most, more than all of them. I think
I
four straight
agree.
losses to Michigan is unacceptable. I think the way that you are trending with a chance to get the number one overall seed, potentially rematching and beating Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, a very limited and honestly banged up Michigan team with probably their two best players out on each side of the ball, Colson Loveland offensively, and or Will Johnson at the cornerback position there defensively. I don't know how Michigan won this. Obviously, Ohio State gave it to them as much as they could, but again, you struggle to win the line of scrimmage against Michigan. And this time it was at your own place. And this time you actually have some bodies to do it. I know the offensive line is struggling there and all that, but with injuries and staying healthy, but it just this one's killer. I did not see this at all coming
No.
through. I didn't even think about putting it on my upset alert because I was like, Michigan is so limited. Ohio State's at home and they're hungry. It's not like they're going to look over Michigan. And I don't think that's what happened at all. And it came back. So Michigan kind of jumped on them with that early interception, led to a touchdown there after they turned the ball over right on inside the one there. But then all of a sudden, Ohio State starts coming back in that second quarter, and you're like, okay, they're just gonna kind of blow them out or really take control of this game in the second half, and it just never happened. It was just waiting, waiting, waiting. When are they gonna take over? And they didn't. And all of a sudden, you look up and Michigan's got the ball. And it's tie game right now, and they're in the red zone, and then they didn't even get it. And then Jack Sawyer makes a hell of a play, and Davis Warren, all he had to do was just throw it over the defensive lineman Jack Sawyer there, and it's a touchdown. And then all of a sudden, a couple plays later, punt, good field position for Michigan, a nice big run springs it, and then they kick a field goal, wind the clock down. I, oh man, this is crazy. This is actually crazy. And then the flag planting and the the pepper spray and everything that happened after that. Obviously, it was crazy. And as a college ball fan, you kind of got to sit back and just watch it and try to take what you can from it. But I don't really know how I feel right now about either of these programs.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Ohio State, I mean, I considered putting Ohio State minus 20.5 on my best bets. I really did. Um, this senior class for Ohio State never beat Michigan. I considered putting this on my best bets because of that edge, that chip, that oh my gosh, look at this wounded animal that we got right here. They smell blood in the water. I thought that Ohio State was going to absolutely stomp them because one, it was a must-win game. Two, it was against a rival who's gotten the best of you the last 3 years, the previous 3 years, and then just you hadn't beaten them in that long. I was shocked. I was shocked as I was watching it happen, and I just kept believing that something was going to happen, that Will Howard was going to do something, this offense was going to do something, and it just didn't happen. And yeah, I'm shocked that Will Howard played that poorly. I know he was banged up, but man, yeah, that all of that offense was just horrendous. And it's not like people haven't been able to score on Michigan either. Like Michigan's had a good defense, not a great one all year, like the one that maybe we anticipated them having throughout the season. So I am just, yeah, that's a great point. I'm not on the Ryan Day train either, but yeah, that's people are gonna look back at this loss as probably his worst loss in because of everything the game means, because of the level of opponent that they were playing, and because of what it meant to get to the Big Ten championship as well. Because your goals as an Ohio State head coach, and he's made this very clear. Beat Michigan, win the Big Ten championship, and win a national championship. And he hasn't done any of those things in the last 4 years.
Yeah, since COVID, really, since 2019. And yeah, honestly, they've been a team. This is probably one of their worst losses in history, especially within recent history, the past couple of
Like
decades.
that in the last decade.
I mean, you got the Purdue loss was bad, and the Iowa loss was bad,
But they bounced back from
but
those,
they
and
did.
they
And it's not Michigan, and it's not a 7-5 Michigan when you know this is the most talented team in the country, and probably I know. I don't know. And I don't even know how to feel about Ohio State going forward because they won't get a chance to redeem themselves until the playoffs. And who knows how it's going to shake out with the SEC and with some of those teams. You might get a really tough matchup in week one in the first round. Like you might get Georgia, you might get Tennessee, you might get Texas or someone like that. And you might be sitting there like you could have had a much, much better shot at it. Now you're putting yourself in a really tough situation. Yeah. It, you could say we could go on from that game. We could talk about recruiting implications. We talk about coaching implications. Who's going to get fired? Who's not? What's going to happen there? And I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but I guess we kind of move on from there because we got so much more to talk about.
yeah, I'll talk about a game that had Big 12 championship implications. Let's talk about Texas Tech, West Virginia, and then after that, you talked about Tim DeRuyter getting fired from that. Uh, I I know Texas Tech fans are really frustrated with what that defense has been. Okay, but you also have to understand that you just don't have the personnel. They just do not have the personnel to match up and run what they want to run. They don't. Okay, they can. They're recruiting better. They're acquiring talent. It is frustrating too. Micah Hudson in the portal, but I think this is a good win. I think an 8-4 season is pretty good. That shouldn't be the standard because of this new power dynamic in the Big 12 where, Utah walks into this thing and they're limping, and Arizona walks into this thing and they're limping. And there's a power grab. TCU, for what they were a couple years ago, they're limping. Um, yeah, and then West Virginia, Neil Brown getting fired. I was really shocked by that. I was really shocked by that. Both those firings for both Texas Tech and West Virginia. Um, yeah, in this game, I mean, Taj Brooks just went nuclear. And kind of
Josh
same old
Kelly.
story. Yeah, Josh Kelly, who, goodness gracious, did we hit on that or what? Call in the offseason how he was going to be a superstar. Yeah, I don't understand the Tim DeRuyter thing, but I don't understand the Neil Brown thing. I get that the results were you had a great senior class for West Virginia. You had really good talent in the front on that defensive line and that offensive line. You had a quarterback that you maybe believed in going into the season. It just didn't pan out. Two great running backs, probably your best receiving core on paper going into a season in the last like 6 or 7 years. And I get it. Yeah, 6 wins is pretty frustrating. But for where you were a couple of years ago, I thought that we were seeing some serious progress. And I think this sets you back a little bit, and I think this hire is very, very, very important because you are behind the eight ball now in that Big 12. Every time you get a new coach, you're resetting, right? You're resetting. So that's kind of tough. So I did not expect that to happen. I'm sure West Virginia fans are celebrating. I'm sure Texas Tech fans are celebrating about Tim DeRuyter. But I just caution everyone to remember that the grass is not always it's not always greener on the other side.
Yeah, change is good sometimes, but also change is not always great. And sometimes you need it, but sometimes you just can't fill it with the right candidates. It's going to be a really interesting coaching cycle there. Glad you brought that up here. I'm going to go to the SEC, and this one is not really college football playoff implications. I just wanted to see where these teams were in their buy-in and whatnot. Oklahoma against LSU night in Death Valley, and I got to give LSU some credit here. Oklahoma came out swinging a little bit, right? They had the strip sack for a touchdown, and they came down the big pass to JJ Hester to kind of go up 14-10, and then the field goal there, and it was an interesting game. And all of a sudden, you know, Garrett Nussmeier just knives them down the field, and they get a touchdown there. They respond very, very well, and yeah, and then they just continue that in the second half. Brian Kelly got a lot of hate this season, right? And obviously it didn't go great because you lost a quarterback. You lost a lot of stuff. You lost some games, 3-game stretch, your 3-game losing stretch. A&M, Alabama, and Florida. I get those teams are playing good football at the time, but it's still frustrating if you are LSU. And then you go back all the way to week one, right? And you see a team in USC who's also, not an elite football team by any standards. So obviously 8-4 is, a good season, but not anywhere near the standard for LSU, especially with the schedule that they kind of got. And if you beat a team like Ole Miss, you thought maybe you could do some things and some damage there. But yeah, I just want to give them some credit here for sticking in. I don't know what's going to happen with quarterback position, but Nussmeier, I thought, played some of his most clean and best football that he has seen all year, and that's going to be so important if you can't consistently run the ball, and especially if your defense is not, as dynamic as we once thought LSU defenses were. But it's a stepping stone here. We'll see what happens in the portal. We'll see what happens, who stays, who goes to the NFL, and all that for LSU. But it is a shame to waste an offensive line like that and
Yeah,
potential receivers. And honestly, Nussmeier, a guy that people were very high on, including myself. But 8-4 is a whole hell lot better than 7-5. What could have been a couple night losses in Death Valley. Not good to see. But and then for Oklahoma, I mean, you're 2-6, 2-6 in the SEC. Obviously, you got some nice wins, right? So you beat Alabama. Tulane's a nice win as well. But other than that, it was kind of frustrating, I think, for a lot of the season and games you could have won or should have won, and you just didn't squeak it out. Obviously, I know the injuries are bad, but they need to have an influx of talent in that facility, especially offensively and now defensively, because you got a lot of guys leaving as well to the NFL. So we'll see what they do there. 6-6 is not okay at Oklahoma, but I do like the way that they fought hard and finished, even after losing to Missouri, even after losing to Ole Miss and all that stuff. But it's obviously needs to get better for Brent Venables if he wants to continue to put Oklahoma in a position to succeed in the SEC, which I think they can eventually. It's just a lot needs to change.
is that two 6-6 seasons in the last 3 years for Brent Venables?
I think so. Well, he's just been there for 3 years, and yeah, season one I think they were
Yeah,
6-6, if not 5-7, or whatever it was. Yeah, they ended the season 6-5, 6-7. So
yeah, they lost to Florida State in the bowl game. That one, like, this is one I think that Oklahoma should stick it out with Brent Venables, but this is one where I thought that he might be getting the can. You know, um, firing Seth Luttrell, right? Obviously, that wasn't working out. It didn't really. I don't think it did that much. Like for the rest of the season, it gave you maybe a chance to reevaluate yourself on offense and be like, okay, these are the things that we don't do well. Putting the ball in the air without any wide receivers on our team.
or offensive
So let's,
line to protect.
yeah, so let's not do that, right? And some of that had to do, you got massacred in the transfer portal on the offensive line, which is unacceptable, by the way. Uh, how you just let teams just march into Oklahoma and just take your best offensive lineman. That to me is pretty ridiculous, but it happened. So and there they are, and this is the result that you got. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of pressure is put on Brent Venables in the offseason. I mean, I'm assuming that they would have fired him, right? If they were going to.
If I were them, it would be interesting because if he gets let go with the way things are looking right now, obviously a lot can change, especially if some stuff goes down in Columbus. But you're looking around the board right now, and Oklahoma would head and shoulders be the best job available. And so I think if you're a program like Oklahoma who has very good resources, but again, not at the elite in terms of like your resources are at a B plus level and your expectations are an A level, A minus level, when those don't match up, you have to nail your coaching hire. And when that happens, I think the timing of that matters so much. And it would be a spot, maybe this cycle where, yeah, you don't know about the candidates that are going to be available. But the reality is, if you are the top spender by far in the cycle, you're going to have your pick of the litter, which could be really interesting there. So I would wonder if the timing happens and maybe they see fit where they have a guy locked in and they know they can go out and get him. If not, yeah, I feel like we would have seen stuff going on so far, but we'll see as Missouri just gets a 5-star offensive tackle decommitted to them. Wow. And then flip
Is
season
that
right now,
Lamont Rogers?
Lamont Rogers. So we'll
Yeah,
see what happens there.
I think we know where he's going. But anyways, speaking of coaches getting moved around, and great coaching hires, Indiana beat the absolute piss out of Purdue, 66-0. I know you've got some funny stats on that, but the Ryan Walters out at Purdue after only 2 seasons because 1-11 is not acceptable. We talked about how limited this team was on talent wise, and instead of like taking the under in their win total, we're like, we're going to take the under on their conference win total because we thought that they, would win some games and they're out of conference slate. Turns out that was too much, right? Turns out that was even too much for them. This team stunk. They were limited everywhere. And do I blame Ryan Walters for a lot of that? Honestly, yeah. I mean, but also we have to think about and thank and respect what Jeff Brom did at Purdue.
Yeah, no, he did. It was tough because he left as soon as they got their most talented team they had there. He left, and then he took some pretty good players with him. And then you
Yes.
also you lose your two best players in the portal on each side of the football, just gone, and a lot. Yeah, it was bad. And your 80 didn't do you any help with
And
scheduling.
Tyrone
And
Tracy went to the NFL as well.
yep, and it's not ideal. And that'll be an interesting job because I know it's a Big Ten job, and I know how coveted those are. But if you look at what's gone on the past couple of years here, and you see the resources being put in that program, I don't see anything. Something has to change dramatically, I think, organizationally there for that to be an attractive job. Or you have to be a guy like Jeff Brom, who's so innovative that can elevate talent and win you games just because of who he is and his style of play. That didn't happen with Ryan Walters. Obviously, I think he was a damn good defense coordinator, and we'll see what happens with his future there. Yeah, he got a short leash, but you kind of had to make a move after what happened there. You're already seeing a portal exodus go on there, so it's going to be a rebuild at Purdue, which is not a great time to be doing a rebuild, especially with the new members in your conference, recruiting, all that good stuff. But if you start getting revenue sharing there, I think Purdue can be an attractive job. And as for Indiana, big time bounce back. It's not ideal seeing Ohio State get pushed around by Michigan after they pushed you around. So we'll see what happens there. But obviously, this team's well coached. This team exceeded expectations by a mile, and dominating your rival and getting them to fire their head coach after that has to feel pretty good for our Hoosier football fans.
Yeah, billion percent.
And I'll
I
go out.
second all that.
Yeah, I'll go out west here, and this is going to be Friday night. It was Stanford against San Jose State, and San Jose State coach Ken getting a win there. They moved to 7-5, 5-2 in conference, and the win against the Stanford Cardinals. As for Stanford, obviously the headline was Andrew Luck kind of being promoted, into your GM spot, whatever that means for Stanford in college football today. But other than the Louisville win and Syracuse win, right, which are great wins for your program, those two teams that won 8-9 games each, but it was a tough schedule. But you just didn't do yourself any favors. You couldn't close out games. You had opportunities to win, like against San Jose State, against Cal, against TCU. So you had a chance to go bowling, but everything did not fall your way. Yeah, it's tough. I think the talent is getting better and better each year. It's defensively, they're not very good. And offensively, they're not very efficient either, which is the thing that Troy Taylor was supposed to bring to them. You look at their opponent adjusted, offensive efficiency. It's not a very good number. It's not where you want to be down with Purdue and some other teams down there in the Power Four. But yeah, I guess it's a big win for the Spartans there at home. How exciting is that to get a win, in your home stadium down there in San Jose? But if you're Stanford, it's just another tough game, another tough season.
Yeah, getting a 7 wins for San Jose State. I know a lot of people listening to this maybe not don't know the dynamics of football down there, but I mean, in this millennium before Brent Brennan, right in that COVID year, they had only had 4 7-win seasons in this millennium, and they've had 3 in back years. I think that's pretty significant. I'll also point out we know how great of a job Brent Brennan did there at San Jose State, but also think about there are some superstars for sure that stayed at that San Jose spot, but if you think about some of the superstars that left, some of the talent that either followed Brent Brennan or went elsewhere,
Or what the
you know,
NFL, Keelan Robinson.
yeah, and Ken Niemtolo, I mean, just he gets fired from by the way, one of the toughest jobs in college football where he won a lot, and he comes over here at San Jose State and just proves once again that and now he has more resources. He's competing in a conference that's appropriate. He's playing against talent that's appropriate uh, at his level, and now he elevated in this game. And San Jose State was actually favored in this game heading into it, but just just a great job by Coach Ken this year. I mean, I know you had a great start to the season, starting 3-0, and then you kind of sprinkled in some losses, and then you had to play Boise State and UNLV in back-to-back weeks. but then kind of coming out and Walker Egan, by the way, what a find later in this year. Wasn't even the starting quarterback going into the season, and he has been phenomenal.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about Coach Ken and like his adjustment to the West Coast and being able to throw the football because of his background at the Naval Academy. And yeah, here he is with one of the best quarterbacks in the Mountain West, one of the best quarterbacks in G5 with what he has done statistically, right? And especially in some big time spots and big time games for them.
Seriously, I want to head over. Let's talk about a 9-win Illinois team.
Yeah.
By the way, going on the road, beating. I say on the road in there at Wrigley Field, right? So neutral site, but whatever. I guess it's Chicago area. Uh, they beat Northwestern by 10. Northwestern, I thought, put up a good fight. AJ Henning did his thing, 22 targets, by the way. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that he should be getting, when he was brought in the building.
The tough part
Um,
is 22 targets, 10 receptions.
yeah,
That's Lausch, that's Bo. I mean, he had some tough stuff, but when you win, you dominate time possession, right? Like dominate, right? 34 and a half to 25 and a half. That's pretty damn impressive for Northwestern. You have 60 more yards than they did and 14 more first downs, and you lose by 10 points. What happened? 4 turnovers. Brutal.
7 yards per carry on the ground, by the way, for Illinois, which we thought when Caden Fegan went down that run game was going to be an issue. Enter some new faces into the equation,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just been an interesting stretch here for Illinois down the season. I think people kind of forgot about them, and they look at that rank next to their name. And they're like, do they really deserve it? I mean, come on, 9 wins in the Big Ten. I know we talked about in the preseason. We both liked the over on their win total, which is at plus money, by the way. Which I'm pissed I didn't actually take it in my best bets. But we talked about it being like, yeah, this is like a good football team. I liked Aaron Henry getting promoted to defensive coordinator. He just didn't have the personnel to run what he wanted. At the wide receiver position, they weren't. I mean, they lost a lot. They lost 2 NFL guys, but enter Pat Bryan, Zachary Franklin. I mean, I know you haven't had Zachary Franklin in recent weeks. I don't even think he played in this game.
Oh, he
Um,
played. He played. He had 3
oh, he did.
catches,
Okay,
54 yards.
but regardless, he was banged up for some of the year. And just the improvement that you saw from Luke Altmaier. Not that he played well in this game because he was pretty bad, but I just think overall, if you look at the sum of the season compared to last year, there were a lot of good improvements and a lot of stuff that you have to like from Brett Bielema right there, getting to 9 wins in the Big Ten, where you know Ryan Walters, your defense coordinator who left, just got canned after he couldn't even win a single game in the Big Ten this year. So credit to Illinois finding a way to get to 9 wins this year. And by the way, 4-8 for Northwestern. Let's not forget, all right, where they are as a program. Okay, like that's fine, and they competed in some games too. So they should have beaten Duke. Actually, yeah, that's probably like the big one. And I guess they kind of got smacked by Washington too, but they could have gotten to 5 wins. In this game, if they played a little better, they could have gotten to 6. But yeah, so I not worried about that program because we just know where they are. Right, they're limited resource wise. They're limited in the transfer portal because of their academic standards. There's just a lot going on there. So, but I mean, hopefully these renovations to the field can get done pretty soon, and their program can start looking at the future.
Yeah, I absolutely I echo all that from you. I'll stay in the Big Ten. Couple results here I want to talk about. I mean, Iowa beating Nebraska is about the least surprising thing ever. Although, you talk about like who actually dominated this game, and it probably was Nebraska. They had almost 200 more yards. They had 15 more first downs. Iowa had 5 first downs all game. They had 20 minutes of time of possession, and yet they won. And that thanks to, again, poor kicking by Nebraska, right? The missed field goal. We talked about that a lot this season in terms of Nebraska's struggles winning close games has been because of that, as well as, the long touchdown pass to a very good football player in Caleb Johnson. I get that, but to open the fourth quarter like that is not ideal. And all of a sudden, you have punt, 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 and then a fumble, and all of a sudden, Iowa kicks a 53-yarder, and yeah, you knew that was going in as soon as he lined up for that, which is a shame for Nebraska. But they get 6 wins, right, which is fantastic for them. Even though it's well below that I think their over under was 7.5, but they still go to a bowl game after limping to the finish line there. And then for Iowa, I mean, again, you win 8 football games with an unbelievably limited quarterback position. I don't know what's going to happen next year without Caleb Johnson. And also, LaShawn Williams is also going, I think, to Kansas now after committing to Memphis. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, it's going to be tough, I think, for Iowa offensively, but it always has been. So it's not like a surprise. It's going to be, well, if they get any kind of help there, what kind of damage can they do next year? They were also the beneficiary of a pretty easy schedule too. We talked about that, and there was a lot of talk around Iowa being like, well, maybe they are a dark horse Big Ten championship, team. And you look at a couple losses to UCLA and Michigan State on the road, and they would be right in it with Indiana and Penn State. Obviously, I don't know what the
Yeah,
tiebreakers would have been. Regardless, though, it's pretty crazy for Iowa to be at 8 wins with that offense. It's fantastic. And then for Notre Dame, just dominating USC. Yeah, that was, I think, very impressed with them offensively. Obviously, USC defensively has been susceptible all season long, but that was a close game for a while, and then Notre Dame really dominated that third quarter and kind of separated. And once they get going, they get a lead, they can do some damage there. Obviously, the interceptions didn't help from Maeva, but this Notre Dame team is impressive. I will say they have gotten better throughout the year, and that NIU loss should not be overlooked, and it is. But in terms of how teams are playing right now, Notre Dame is right up there with most of the teams in the country.
yeah, I agree. I've been really impressed with the way that they played. Now, I guess strength of schedule down the stretch could definitely be questioned a little bit, but I'm with you in the sense where like when I'm watching them play, they look like a good football team. They look like, by my tongue as I say, it's a college football playoff team, despite that loss. And, there's some other teams too that we can talk about that, and we'll talk about in a preview in a little bit, like teams like South Carolina that took losses early in the season, but are right now looking like a college football playoff team. One thing I have concern about, Notre Dame going forward, I know Jadarian Price is a really solid running back, but Jeremiah Love tweaking his knee a little bit. We'll see if he's able to get healthy, these next couple of weeks. Fortunately, they don't have to play a conference championship game, and which is crazy. But I guess now I kind of respect it because now that you got a 12-team playoff and some teams are going to be asked to play 17 games if they want to win a national championship. But so I don't know. And then Miller Moss obviously hitting the transfer portal too after this game. Uh, we'll see if he lands. I think he'll land somewhere pretty decent. I think someone can get a lot out of him. I think Jade Mayava is a good looking quarterback for USC moving forward, and I think Lincoln Riley can do a lot for him. Because remember, he's true. He's a true sophomore,
Redshirt
right? So
sophomore.
Redshirt, really?
Yeah, he was a
Okay.
redshirt freshman last year from at
Oh,
UNLV.
okay. For some reason, I thought he was a true freshman last year. But anyways, point still stands, right? 2 years of playing experience. Now you're moving that into year three of playing experience under Lincoln Riley. We'll see how he does, I guess, in this bowl season and then also in next season because I'm pretty excited for that. Not that Usain Longstreet could push him because I think he definitely could, but it'll be interesting to see the dynamic of that quarterback room also moving forward. But yeah, I think Riley Leonard, people talked about like this quarterback transport class, not being great, and maybe it wasn't, right? Uh, Riley Leonard is we talk about this all the time. There's frisky quarterbacks, there's elite quarterbacks, there's good quarterbacks, and there's gamer quarterbacks, right? Guys that just can get it done, guys that just can win football games. I think Riley Leonard can do that, right? When push comes to shove, when the game gets physical, when things get tough, he's a leader. He takes responsibility. It'll be really fun to watch him in the college football playoffs. I'm pretty excited to actually see that. So I don't know what that's going to look like. I would imagine that uh, they're going to have that home football or that home playoff game. So that'll be nice. But it'll be interesting to see who they draw. So
Yeah, real quick, can I go back to Oklahoma LSU?
yep.
Oklahoma, we talked about the offense coordinator spot with Seth Luttrell, and what they're going to do there. They just hired Ben Arbuckle from Washington State,
Wow, that was fast.
who was previous of Western Kentucky. That to me is a pretty damn good hire. We'll see how it shakes out in the SEC, but in terms of guys that I respect and their offense, what they can do, I don't think that's crazy at all.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, look what he's done with Jean Mateer. Look what he did with Cam Ward. Look what he did over at Western Kentucky when he was there. I
Getting a
mean,
couple quarterbacks drafted.
yeah, many quarterbacks drafted. So I respect him a lot as well. And trying to think, well, Will Stein was that other, was he Western Kentucky or was he was Washington State, right? No, he was UTSA. No, where was he?
Will
Dang
Stein.
it, I'm forgetting. I think it might have been UTSA. Shoot, I totally was going to relate something that was cool, but it's not even related. But yeah, that sounds like a great hire to me. Off the top of my head, I don't have numbers, notes in front of me at all, but I like that a lot. And when they were at their best, they had that Jeff Levy. They were slinging the rock all over the yard, and that also gives me confidence that Oklahoma's not going to fire Brent Venables if they're going to let him hire an offensive coordinator. So there you go. That answers that question that we had earlier. How about NC State pulling off a win against North Carolina in
That,
that fourth quarter?
that was on my best bets too.
Yeah, actually, we'll talk about that later, but that has a lot of interesting dynamics moving forward, given the coaching changes and player personnel changes that are happening. Unfortunately, on the NC State side, but I guess Marshall clinches there. I mean, clinches the Sun Belt berth, with a win over James Madison. So good for them. Although they kind of blew that game, right? If I recall.
No, so they had to come back and come
I
back and
mean,
win that game.
like James Madison.
Yes, no, Madison did. Yeah. I thought they did as well. But
So that'll be Louisiana versus Marshall in the conference championship game. It's an interesting look right there. I think Louisiana. We're not in previews, obviously, but without Ben Woolridge, I mean, you like Chandler Fields. I know you do, and but I also kind of like the way Marshall's been playing a lot right now. So um,
and
I want to go
Hardy.
back. That's a game that I want to go back and watch, but I just wanted to bring it up just because of the Sun Belt Championship implications, I guess, that game had.
It's a huge deal, and James Madison, a team that obviously finishes with 8 wins, which is a successful season. But they're a team that, couple bounces of the ball here and there, and they're in the Sun Belt Championship playing against Louisiana, Georgia Southern, same way, Old Dominion as well. That was such a competitive conference through and through. It's just that division, right? With Coastal and App, obviously App letting go of their coach. See what's going to happen there. I'll go back to the SEC here. We haven't really talked too much about it, but Georgia Tech and Georgia, right? Obviously, Georgia Tech should have won that game and they should have been up a lot more. I know they battled injuries in the second half, which led, Georgia to be able to come out and play better. But I mean, first of all, we'll talk about Georgia Tech because I think they deserve a ton of flowers this season and what they have done. And we talked about them and Florida as teams that played really hard schedules, but we like the talent on that team and how dangerous they can be in some of these games. And they were going to get somebody. They got Miami earlier and they almost got Georgia in Athens this year. They had 563 yards, only one turnover, 37 minutes of time of possession, and you were up 17-0, and you couldn't quite close it up 2 touchdowns with less than 5 minutes to go. Yeah, it's just brutal. It is really tough, obviously, but I think I think that very, very impressed with Georgia Tech this year. I think they got a lot of things going well for them. Haynes King finally looked healthy, which was a sight to see, and good luck to anyone who gets them in the bowl game, depending on where they end up, because if they get a lot of buy-in from those players playing, which I think they will, yeah, they're going to be a really tough team at 7-5 with that schedule. Yeah, that's all I got.
I mean, Brent Key, this is his alma mater. He's recruiting at unprecedented levels there at Georgia Tech. I mean, if I am a Power Five school who needs a head coach right now, I'm probably giving him a call. And I'm also,
He probably wouldn't take it. Well, it depends
well,
where,
that's what I'm
but
saying. Like, you probably won't take it. But then I'm also, I don't know for a head coaching job, but if I'm I don't know, a really big power conference school, say, I just lost to my rival for the fourth straight year, and then I just fired my offensive coordinator, which hasn't happened yet, this season. But if that were the case, Buster Faulkner had Kirby Smart pissing his pants in overtime. 3 timeouts Kirby Smart had to call in overtime because they were not set. They didn't know what they were even looking at. He's done it with 2 quarterbacks pretty much this whole second half of the year. He has been an absolute master class. I'm going to be on Team Buster Faulkner until until the end of time. This dude is unbelievable. I cannot wait to see what he continues to do for Georgia Tech or some other team or whatever he ends up doing and being. Uh, I just I look at his offense and I am just so impressed every time with the way that he's able to create space in the run games, create mismatches in the receiving game, allow his quarterbacks to play to their strengths. I just think he's so good at what he does, and he does not get enough flowers. And Tyler Santucci, for that matter, the defense coordinator there, ended up. We talked about preseason how was that going to be a big deal of a hire? Which one was going to be a bigger hire? Was that going to be a bigger hire, or was the D'Anton Lynn for USC going to be a bigger hire? And I think that the Santucci hire really did end up making a big difference, and I think that your defensive coordinator was a problem the season before.
I hope they get some buy-in. I hope they get some retention there as well. I think Haynes King also has one more year, so if you run that back with Buster Faulkner, obviously Singleton's still there, and yeah, it could be a dangerous team. I mean, yeah, we're Team Buster Faulkner. We have been for a while, and I hope he gets some higher looks because he deserves it. Although it's a great job at Georgia Tech too, by the way. You're recruiting well. You got dynamic players around you. You also have a head coach who's an offensive guy, right? He was an offensive line coach, and so he obviously is committed to running the football. So I think there's a lot worse places to be if you're Faulkner. I just think nationally he deserves a ton more credit than he's giving. That's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. Do you have any more that you wanted to really look at before?
I mean, not really. I mean, the Florida State was kind of a joke. That was going to happen. Although we know DJ Lagway is a good football player.
I mean, Memphis, Tulane. I mean, that was one of your best bets. We'll talk about that. But
Yeah,
so then, with that being said, we'll just move over to our dirty dogs. Right? If you're here for the first time, what are our dirty dogs? They're 10-point underdogs that CD and I pick every week. We draft two of them and see if they can win straight up. I don't know how many 10-point underdogs won this week. I think it was a decent amount. Memphis was definitely one of them. Uh, almost Georgia Tech. Michigan was a big stinky dirty dog that we did not find, but on the year, we actually ended up doing pretty well because we found one more this week, and that was Syracuse plus 330. Both times Miami's lost this year, we've caught them on the dirty dogs sleeping. Uh, yeah, so I guess in that game, you had just once again the Miami defense just. I'm so disappointed in that defense because I really believed that they had talent. And I guess in that secondary, I thought Lance Guidry was like I don't know what his status is moving forward, right? Like whether he's gonna have a job or not. But I thought what he did, in his time at Marshall, I thought he was fantastic. I thought that this secondary, yes, they lost two important pieces, but I'm like, really? I mean, like another, they're all right pieces in the NFL right now, but really, how good are they? Right? Like I saw like a lot of missed coverages. I think that they're really good in that run game and playing downhill and making exceptional ball hawking plays, but I don't know. I just felt like there's some spots that I was like, maybe those are holes that they can fill, and it just no, they stunk, man. They stunk this year, and from a pass rushing perspective, they were all right. It wasn't elite. Linebacker play, like it just like it did not fall together the way that I thought it was going to fall together for Miami, and that's why they're able to get got like a Georgia Tech. That's why they're able to get got by a Syracuse. That's why they could have gotten got by Virginia Tech. Or the multiple other teams that they almost stumbled to. Earlier in the season that Cam Ward really made up for. And if you want to talk about like guys that should be in New York, right? Yeah, Cam Ward. I mean, there's just no argument to be made that he shouldn't be at least invited to New York because of what he meant to this team and like the deficits that he made up and the absolute unreal plays that he made time and time again. He was second in the country in passing yards. He was first in the country in touchdowns. He also had 4 rushing touchdowns to put on top of that. He was absolutely phenomenal this year. So credit to Cam Ward. Unfortunately for Miami, I, I don't know what the college football playoff is going to do with them. I would think that they still got a pretty good chance to get in, but this does hurt. You let Clemson sneak into the ACC championship to play against SMU, a team that I think they definitely could have beaten. I think they could beat both of those teams, but it's just really unfortunate ending to the season, I think, for Miami fans. And yeah, just I, it's unfortunate, I think, because this was a really, really good football team. And 10 wins, they don't see very often, right? Because of, coaching or whatever you have you. So this is a good season for what we've seen in Miami. But I think the expectations, you were starting to recalibrate your expectations midway through the season when they're 6-0. You're like, holy cow, this could be a really, really, really good football team. And then you just had the slip up the Georgia Tech and the slip up the Syracuse that really kind of leave at least to me, kind of a bad taste in my mouth for sure.
I mean, I don't know when you're going to have a guy as transcendent as Cam Ward at the quarterback position, along with all the talent that you see everywhere at every position, and to get to an ACC that was probably down this year, right? With Louisville not being super elite and as dangerous as we thought, Clemson obviously very, very vulnerable, losing 2 games in the out of conference as well. So this was the year to do it if you're Miami, and the 12-team playoff too. You had all you got to do is not blow a lead, and you got out early like all season long in games you've struggled in. It's been you've slow starts or whatever. Your offense has to come back and carry you, and all of a sudden it's the other way around. Your defense just could not get stops. When obviously the fumble, scoop and score that killed you. I get that, but to give up 35 points on defense to Syracuse, and I'm a fan of letting Cam Ward make a play there at the end and not kicking the field goal just because of how your defense is playing. I think you let Cam Ward just figure it out. And although it does suck, there's 4 minutes to go and you couldn't get the ball back. But again, this Miami team, a lot to build on. It was a successful season at times, right? You did hit part of your potential was hit there and unleashed with Cam Ward. It sucks that there's not a ton to show for it because you're probably going to miss the playoffs. And, that's obviously the expectation there at Miami, like you said. But I don't know. But also for Fran Brown here, Syracuse, hell of a year. God damn it, 9-3 wins over Georgia Tech, wins over UNLV, right? Wins over um, Miami as well. Like this was an awesome season for Syracuse. We talked about this being a year where their schedule was super, super, you know, nice is the right word, right? Or it's very, very, easy in year one for Fran Brown. And you had to take advantage of it, and they did. You also got a nice out of conference win over Ohio too, who might be the MAC champion as well. So hats off to Syracuse there and what they can do, hopefully build as they continue to go forward and also fighting this game. You go down 21-0 at home to a really good team and you just stay the course. Kyle McCord had a hell of a year. LaQuint Allen was good in the red zone when it
Hell of a
mattered.
year. Led the country in passing yards, by the way. 4,300 yards, 29 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Now, that Pitt game was
Oh
garbage.
yeah. That's why you're not 10-2.
Horrible.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But
brutal. And they could have lost the UNLV game, but I mean, Kyle McCord had a lot to do with them coming back in that game and fighting and winning that ball game. So
yeah, and then the other dirty dogs, the at least dirty dogs I had there, Kennesaw State got boat raced by Louisiana Tech, and then Vandy. It looked good early, right? They had everything going
mm-hmm.
for them. You had some turnovers, you had some short fields, and then there was a 4th and 1, 4th and 2, whatever it was, and you tried to go for it, couldn't get it. Pavia got kind of sacked there, and then it was kind of downhill from there. Defensively, you couldn't get stops in the second half, and it kind of just snowballed into Tennessee, with some explosive plays. But for Tennessee, I mean, it's big there because you needed that game, and now all of a sudden Tennessee is one of the few teams that feels really good where they're at. They don't have to play this week. They're probably pretty comfortably in, and they might even have a home game, which is crazy to say in there. And if you want to play a home game in Knoxville, there, that's a pretty good place to play. I think that's a pretty good home field advantage for them. So everything that's gone wrong for Tennessee this year, and maybe Nico not hitting their ceiling, and for everything that did happen and wrong, you saw teams lose when all they have to do is just win, and they're in, and they just did it. They won. Didn't matter how they looked. They got to win. All that matters is that they add to their win column, and they're going to the playoffs.
yeah, good for them. Good for Josh Heupel. Good for Tennessee. Uh, Last year, dog, and the one that I actually drafted first was Auburn plus 380, and that one did not hit on my side. So, but going 1-3 on the week, And your Vanderbilt one still looked good. On the season overall, we finished, was that 12-42, which sounds like a terrible record, but I think that's pretty stinking good. We ended up finishing the year up 2.4 units, by the way, if you were just bet our money lines throughout the whole season. So to me, that's pretty good. 12-42 doesn't sound like a great record, but that's, I mean, pretty close to about 25%. So you're actually probably looking about like 20%, which inherently, like a 10-point spread is probably going to cover, or we're just going to win straight up. Like, which is funny. This is how volatile college football is. A 10-point spread implies that a team is going to win like 75, 78% of the time. So if you think that, that's why we do this too. Like 10-point spreads are just not free. They're just not. So
It's a good exercise to see what you think is going to happen there, and also for that Auburn game, right? Like they won the turnover margin. Peyton throwing it over 300 yards. Like there were some things that were there to happen. That's also like why sometimes these games are so hard to win. Like you need so much to go right for you to make up that 10-point plus spread. And Alabama gets a win there, and who knows what's going to happen with the playoffs there. I'm not going to speculate because a lot has to play out yet. But yeah, I mean, holy cow.
seriously. But yeah, good for us being 2.4 units up in the positive, 12-42. I'll take that for a Dirty Dog season, which I guess we'll figure out what we want to do with the bowl games, but there's no Dirty Dogs to be had in the conference championships. They're all lines that are under 4 points, which is freaking awesome. So there's going to be some great football games. Can't wait. Heading over to the counter, though, just a garbage week for me to end on the year. And for you, it wasn't as bad. I went 1-4, which sucks because if any one of those covered, I would have ended positive on the year, but I went down 1.06 units, finishing 40-38 after I was in the green pretty much 13 weeks. Um, I was in the green, and then this last week just dipped me down, which kind of stinks. And then you on the other side, you went 3-4. You went down 1.27 units, but went up 1.49 units on the season. So I guess we went positive, which is nice because there are other college football shows that do this sort of thing, and they're way in the negatives, like way in the negatives. So I think we did fine. We don't. I mean, we don't have a model or anything like that. Just some sharp gamblers out here. Just having fun with this. But for me, my losses: A&M +6. Yeah, I would not do that again. After watching that game, we'll talk about that. New Mexico -1.5. I really thought they were going to do it, and they got smacked. At least early in the game. I didn't get to watch most of that game, but that did not hit. Jacksonville State, Tyler Huff gets hurt. Had them +1.5 in a Western Kentucky game. That was basically to eliminate Western Kentucky, but Western Kentucky stays alive, and they'll be rematching this week. And I thought Tyler Huff was going to be a difference maker, but he gets hurt. And Logan Smothers, who I absolutely have pooped on this show several times, he comes in and actually looked like played pretty decent, but then Western Kentucky finds a way to win that football game. So credit to them, I guess. Arkansas +3.5. That was brutal. That one definitely could have covered. And then South Carolina +2.5 was my only win. And that one even took like a fourth quarter surge. So I just was not sharp this week. Not sharp. You, on the other hand, Tulane -14. They lost straight up. So that was not a winner. Louisiana -8.5. That one cashed. You were on New Mexico with me -1.5, and Jacksonville State +1.5. Those did not hit. NC State +4. That was pretty sharp. I was very skeptical when you took that, but then you had Michigan State -1, who played Rutgers and lost. So that did not hit. And then you had TCU -2.5 against Cincinnati, and they won. So, CD, what did you like about what you took? Regrets, bad beats? What happened?
Yeah, I didn't get the Michigan State team that I wanted this week, so that's pretty tough. Got blown out there. Same with Tulane, man. Maybe I want to go back and look at their schedule and really see who they beat, but they were dominating everybody. And that game meant a lot for them, and I thought style points were going to matter as well. It sucks to happen there on Thanksgiving. And then, yeah, the two I was with you on, New Mexico got just torched by a backup quarterback. And then Jacksonville State, that was kind of a bad beat, I thought, at the end there. So obviously, tough week for us, but overall, I mean, I was plus units. Overall, as a show, we were plus units, so we'll take that. I absolutely had a lot of fun with this. Hope you guys enjoyed as well.
Yeah, Hawaii. They finished season what 5-7. Man, that and New Mexico, both of them missing out on bowl games. I thought like if it just would have been so nice to be not that we aren't right about it, but we were just so high on that Bronco Mendenhall hiring at New Mexico. It just would have been like so validating for it to see him make a bowl game in his first season there. Would have been nuts. Would have been nuts. After everything that they lost on the offensive line, they're losing your running back, having a brand new quarterback. It just would have been really cool, I think, to see that. But yeah, that's where we are. But yeah, we had a lot of fun with this. So I guess it's not over though when we get into the conference games and bowl games, which, by the way, pretty sure I murdered in the bowl games last year. So I'm coming back for vengeance. Let's get into the games that we previewed. Let's start with South Carolina at Clemson. South Carolina needed a late surge against Clemson to pull this one off. But Lenore's Sellers continuing to find ways to win football games. South Carolina continuing to find ways to win football games. They're playing some of the best football in the country right now, relative to some of the other teams that were thought to be in the college football playoffs just a couple weeks ago. So, one, Sadie, what is your thoughts on this game, and then where do you see South Carolina sitting in the college football playoff picture right now?
Yeah, I mean, I unfortunately I think they're on the outside looking in. I think they would need a lot of help and probably not going to get it. Fortunately, the head-to-head loss with Alabama in a game which you should have won, right? Like you go back and look at that game, they had plenty of chances to win that, and they didn't. But obviously, a nice win against Clemson,
The LSU unnecessary roughness penalty, that was garbage.
kind of
Absolutely
out of your control.
disgusting.
But going back, LSU again, very very flawed team. Like I think that loss looks a little bit worse today than it did, a couple months ago. But yeah, this is a big win for South Carolina on the road. I mean, so Sellers is unbelievable. He did to Clemson what they have done all year when he has been healthy, and that is be impossible to tackle. Him and Sanders have been awesome. I thought Clemson's wide receivers at times took over the game, and I wanted to see that go continue throughout. And that couldn't happen. I thought they got the best of that South Carolina defense, especially that secondary. But yeah, it was tough. This was an awesome game. It was a rivalry game. It felt like a mini playoff game. Now, Clemson, because this was out of conference, they're still in it technically because they can win the automatic bid by beating SMU thanks to the Miami loss to Syracuse earlier. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think South Carolina's out, but man, oh man, this is a good freaking football team. And I don't think anybody wants to play them. But again, I still thought Clemson probably should have won or could have won very easily,
Mm-hmm.
and they just
Definitely.
didn't. I think it's pretty disappointing for them to go 9-3 after going 8-1 in conference, 7-1 in conference.
Yeah, and they become a potential bid stealer now, right? I mean, because like I would think, and now the college football playoff committee has commented on that they're not going to punish teams as heavily in conference championship games if they lose, right? I think injuries, could play a role in certain things. I think, although I think it was different for Florida State because you saw what they had at quarterback and it was garbage. But if SMU loses, right, to Clemson in the conference championship, like you're you can't can you boot them out of the college football playoffs?
SMU, I don't know. I'm very against it. I'm very against punishing teams for playing because if you're the ACC, then what the hell is it for other than just to make money for your conference? Like it, to me, that would be very frustrating because you have a team like Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, teams that had chances to earn their way not only to an at-large bid, but to their conference championship game, the 13th football game. It's not like you're playing against nobody. You're playing against a Clemson team that probably should have beaten one of the hotter teams in the country in South Carolina. No, I think SMU's in no matter what. As long as you don't lose by 50 and Kevin Jennings gets hurt, like I think that's a little different story. But if it plays out like a normal football game and Clemson happens to get a win there, yeah, they both should be in. That's how I feel.
Okay, all right, and then so then in that situation, Clemson becomes a bid stealer and boots out some unfortunate team. So yeah, just great season for South Carolina. I think in both what was Clemson's over on a win total at 8.5 this year. Hold on, I got it right here.
I had
It
it
was
at
at nine.
9. Yeah.
It was at nine, and I guess I leaned under in that. I think you leaned over in that situation, so I guess we pushed. It didn't matter. But the South Carolina one is the one that I feel pretty proud of. That was like the one that I was very convicted on that this was going to be a good football team, and it turns out that they were, and had a lot to do with their defense. But then late in the season, it ended up being their offense that kind of helped them play some complementary football. And Lenore Sellers taking that step was a big deal, and it'll be really interesting to see. Next year you lose a ton on the defensive side of the football, but what Lenore Sellers, if he continues to grow into that role at quarterback, first of all, where do you rank him in terms of SEC quarterbacks? I think you've had an SEC quarterback problem this year for what you thought it was going to be. You thought that Connor Wigman was going to take that step. You thought Nico Amalieva was going to take a bigger step than he did. I don't know. Graham Mertz got hurt. I mean, Carson Beck looked like he kind of regressed. Jackson Dart had some bad weeks. Jackson Arnold looked like a ghost of himself. I mean, just you had some up and down quarterback play in the SEC. So it'll be interesting to see where he stacks up next year against some of those other SEC quarterbacks. But I want to see South Carolina play in the college football playoffs. Not that I'm not sure that they should get in, because I haven't broken down the numbers, so don't go screaming at me, saying like, oh, they should or should not get in, right? I'm just saying I think it'd be interesting to give them a chance because I don't think anyone wants to play against them right now.
Not that D line either.
No, not at all. Let's talk about Kansas State going to Iowa State, and making it a game late, I guess. But Iowa State, pulling away, having just a great season, finding their way into the Big 12 championship. Um, we both picked Kansas State in the situation. I thought that Kansas State was going to get them on the ground. I remember you told me off air that you took some DJ Giddens props, as because of that, and I don't blame you at all. I thought that this game was going to be a lot of Kansas State football on the ground, dominating the time of possession, retaining the football, and yeah, it just did not happen that way. And Iowa State finds himself in the Big 12 championship, potentially to win their first Big 12 championship.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, ton of credit to Matt Campbell. This is their first 10-win season. Like you said, first chance to win the Big 12. Incredible at home rivalry game. It was awesome. So happy for them. They capitalized on mistakes that Kansas made. I talked about it, and this is why I felt good taking Kansas State. Yes, I mentioned the running, but also I thought Kansas State, when they take care of the football, they're a really good football team, and they did not. First fucking play of offense. Excuse my language here. First play of offense, right? Whatever it was. Second, like you're the weird, speed option fumble, whatever it was, right? It was just terrible. And all of a sudden, 6 plays later, Iowa State's in the end zone, and then you're playing catch up, which is not where Kansas State wants to be, right? You only punted a couple times throughout the game because you had turnover on downs. I think 3 of them. You had the safety, which was, obviously a tough spot there. You had to make a play, but still not ideal. And then obviously the missed field goal, a couple fumbles actually too. See that one and then one later as well. Yeah, this is brutal. And for Kansas State, this kind of has been the trend all year in terms of shooting yourself in the foot, especially in a conference where you are probably more talented than most teams you play significantly. And you end the season 1-3 in November there. Yeah, that's kind of brutal. That is absolutely brutal there. Not the finish that they wanted because they did have a chance to go to the playoffs. They did have a chance to win the Big 12. And obviously, this is not ideal here, but hats off to Iowa State. They get a huge win there. Rocco Becht, I thought, was efficient at times. Obviously, the numbers don't look great, but I thought what he did on third down, finding guys, what he did, rolling out of the pocket, even stepping up and running, getting a couple first downs was huge for them. Obviously, the touchdown was big, but this is an interesting team. I think Arizona State's probably matches up pretty well against them, but Iowa State, I mean, they beat Iowa. Right? You have a couple pretty damn good wins. Baylor, um, you know, Kansas State as well. So there's some nice wins on this resume for Iowa State, and obviously, a 10-2 season is unbelievable. Very nice for them. Happy to see them rewarded and have a chance to win the Big 12.
Yeah, and there were like good wins on here too. I mean, you didn't have to play Colorado, okay, but big whoop, whatever. But Iowa, that comeback win, that was a big win. Baylor ended up being a good win, and they dominated Baylor. Now I know that was a different Baylor team than we saw, but You ended up coming back against UCF, which was kind of a big deal because then you wouldn't be playing in the Big 12 championship if you didn't find a way to win that game that you probably could have definitely lost. So yeah, run defense was a problem, but finding a way, like you said, to convert those third downs, those big ones when you needed them. Not that it was perfect, and then also Kansas State going 1 for 4 on fourth down conversions, and then also having your two fumbles, and that yeah, it's just not a recipe to win a football game. Definitely could have won this football game for sure, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see Avery Johnson's future at Kansas State. Obviously, he's the guy moving forward, but I mean, like, he's got to get better throwing the football. He really does.
And take care of it too. And also for Iowa State here, when I look at the scoreboard here, the box score, and I see 40 plus rushing attempts, I love that. I've talked about Rocco Becht, I've talked about Higgins and Noel. Those are very good football players, but when this team is at its best, I've repeated this all year long. It's when they commit to running the football. Abu Sama had 15 plus carries, averaged almost 5.5 yards per carry. Carson Hansen, 13 more carries, 4.5 yards per carry. Those are what you need to win in close games like this against teams that are pretty darn good. And you're a team that was supposed to get gashed on the ground, and all of a sudden you're doing it back to Kansas State, keeping drives alive. Because you had better third down percentage than Kansas State, although it wasn't great, but a little bit better. Yeah, it's big. It's big, and yeah, happy for Iowa State here.
Heading over to the MAC, a win and in situation from Miami, Ohio versus Bowling Green. We both thought Bowling Green was going to take this one home because it was at home. I don't know that you have a more talented team, but you have a handful of players that are very, very spectacular on Bowling Green. And they did not get it done. Miami, Ohio, they took it to them, man. Brett Gabbert is playing fantastic football right now, by the way. This last stretch of games that he's had, he is playing so well, and we know how good that defense is from Miami, Ohio. They were suffocating. Bowling Green tried to force feed Harold Fannin Jr. It did not work, okay? And 17 targets, 8 catches, 47 yards. Yeah, that's losing football right there. So, and once like Miami got up 14-5, I know Bowling Green kind of made it closer after that. But to me, it just felt like, man, that's a big old deficit right there with that Miami defense. And then Bowling Green scored, but then Miami scored again, and then they just
The quick score, it was a 7 yard touchdown. That was
yeah.
huge. That was winning. You'd be imagine it was losing football for Bowling Green, but winning football from this Miami High team again in November. They are so good in the MAC in November, and they struggled early on too offensively. You had 2 interceptions, you had a safety. You put your defense behind the 8 ball against a very talented football team, very talented offense in Bowling Green, and you shut them down for that first half. It was awesome. You got Mosey going on the ground a little bit as much as you could against a pretty stout defense as well. And you stopped Stewart, you stopped Johnson, Patterson, Fannin, all those guys, for Bowling Green on the ground. You said it all. I mean, this was awesome. I think it's going to be an awesome matchup for Miami, Ohio playing in-state rival Ohio Bobcats in the MAC championship game. I think that's going to be, what is that? It's Saturday at 11 a.m. They're right on ESPN, so big spot for them. I hope a lot of people tune in that game because, yeah, it's not huge playoff implications, but both these teams have been playing great football and deserve to be there. And very happy for the Red Hawks there. And for Bowling Green, is it a disappointing season? I mean, I think
I yeah yeah. I think you had a good season, but you underachieved to
I,
what you could have.
I think if you told me Toledo's going 4-4 in conference, and you're playing Penn State and Texas A&M down to the wire in their buildings, yeah, I mean, it would have been really nice to see and them really take advantage of that. But hats off to Miami, Ohio, because they played a hell of a football game and they won when it mattered.
I agree. Let's move on over to the Big 12, a game that, mattered when it happened, right? Because you didn't know whether or not Baylor was going to be able to make it to the conference championship, whether Kansas was going to make the bowl game. After Kansas has just been playing such good football, But holy cow, is Sawyer Robertson and Baylor and their squad there playing unbelievable football. You got Bryson Washington, who had 192 yards, which put him over 1,000 yards on the year. By the way, this is his last 4 games, by the way, okay, where he's averaging almost 7 yards a carry, by the way. He had 192 yards, 113 yards, 123 yards, and 196 yards on the ground in those 4 games, and 9 touchdowns for Bryson Washington. Not even mentioning what Dawson Pendergrass did there, 11 carries, 104 yards on the ground. He had 600 yards on the year. I thought he was going to be the main guy, but Bryson Washington kind of took that over. Sawyer Robertson, last 4 games, okay, 310 yards through the air, 204 yards through the air, 329, 242. I mean, such good football down the stretch. Such good football down. And it didn't look beautiful against Houston, but he got it done there. And then you just look at like basically from that Texas Tech game on when they won those 6 games in a row. What was it? 8, 11, 12. So 16-4 touchdown to interception ratio in those games. Um, he looks like a dude. And you were on this early, and I'll keep giving you credit for it because you were a guy that believed in him basically this whole time. You've been high on Baylor these last 2 seasons. Never wrong, just early, right? And Dave Aranda looking like he's kind of saved his job here. And this is a really good season. And, they brought in Daquan Finn because of their struggles at the quarterback position. And it looks like their advancer was in the building the whole time
Yeah,
by the name of Sawyer Robertson.
I think he's got at least another year of eligibility, if not two, depending on how it works out there with the eligibility. But yeah, I mean, you said it, man. I super impressed with this Baylor football team. I took Kansas because I thought they were playing elite football, and I thought they'd be able to run the football, which they did. Devin Neal had over 6 yards per carry, almost 7. Daniels got his on the ground a little bit, and then obviously it was turnovers, it was missed opportunities, but that defense just could not get anything going against this Baylor team. They had the one stop early, and after that, it felt like Baylor was just moving the ball at will, and they left points on the board with the missed field goal as well. So it could have been even worse. Obviously,
13 of 17 on third down is crazy.
yeah,
How demoralizing is that for your defense? Just unable to get off the field.
600 yards, almost 38 yards, or 38 minutes of time possession out of 60. Yeah, this is domination by that Baylor offense, and give them a ton of credit. They had 2 guys over 100 yards. You mentioned Washington. Pendergrass had the big run late and kind of added to that total. But yeah, this is a dangerous football team. I think a lot of teams in the bowl pool, whatever's going to happen there with Baylor and their Big 12 tie-ins, like they're not a team that anybody wants to play right now because at 8-4 they have been extremely hot recently, and I hope Dave Aranda gets some attention and credit because he deserves it because they were dead in the water, right? You lose to Colorado and everyone kind of signed them off and they're like, yep, it's over there. And then they lose to BYU close, and then it's getting worse here for Baylor and Dave Aranda, and then you get blown out by Iowa State. You couldn't stop the run and whatever else happened, and then all of a sudden, something clicked against Texas Tech, and they've been playing great football since. So love my Baylor Bears for that. Obviously, glad to hit their over, which cashed with and then some. Right, their over under was 5.5, and they had 8-4, which is awesome. So yeah, very excited for this Baylor football team. For Kansas, they would have been nice to make it to a bowl game. They caused a lot of havoc in November for the Big 12. I mean, there were some funny memes. I think Big 12 Barstool was having a good time with it, and it was awesome. I think this is a dangerous team. Obviously, they won't be in the postseason, no bowl game for them, but I still think you believe in Lance Leipold. I still think you got a lot of pieces there. It would have been nice to capitalize on Daniels. I think you saw him get more healthy as the year went on, and I am not sure about his eligibility because who knows with how that works in college football. I believe he's got one more year because of what happened last year, but we'll see. Regardless, though, credit to the Baylor Bears.
Minnesota not only had a great season, by the way, I think overachieving any expectations that general media had on this football team with some meat on the bone, by the way, and some close losses for sure. They knock out Wisconsin and their bowl game streak of 23 years and running their rival, and they bring back home Paul Bunyan's axe, shutting down Braden Locke, shutting down Tawee Walker, getting Darius Taylor going on the ground, which had been a struggle all year. Daniel Jackson getting his, Elijah Spencer continuing to look awesome. As his emergence this year has been so valuable for Brosmer's growth this year, in my opinion. Just an impressive effort from this defense by Minnesota. We were both on Minnesota in this game. We both like them. Um, they were plus 2.5 in this game.
It switched back and forth. Yeah, they were
It
plus two
switched
and a
back and
half, I
forth.
think.
I think when we picked it, but yeah, I mean, it's a good win for Minnesota and a great year. Terrible read by me in the preseason, I guess. Some of the things that I thought would happen did happen early in the season. Like, hey, I didn't think that front seven was very good. I didn't think the secondary was very deep. They stayed healthy. Wasn't sure what Max Boser was going to look like. Was he going to be checked down Triller? Was he going to take advantage of the wide receivers that he had? Was Elijah Spencer going to take a jump? I didn't think so, but there he was, taking a big jump this year. So a lot of things that Minnesota fans were hoping to project, or hoping that would project to be true, ended up being pretty true. So good for the Gophers this year, man, as they move forward, making another bowl game, hopefully winning another bowl game.
Yeah, they've been awesome. Obviously, as a Minnesota fan myself, very pleased with the outcome. Obviously, getting the X back, beating your rival here, going to a bowl game, that's the expectation. And I think they're going to keep a lot of fans happy. You're going to keep your job for a long time if you are PJ Fleck. You saw some of the stars emerge today. Darius Taylor, 143 yards, a little bit more through the air as well. Brosmer played efficient football. He was the highest graded PFF quarterback in the country. I know his stat line doesn't look eye popping. I know you thought he'd have more passing yards, but he was
He was
fantastic.
great.
And he was for all of November and most of October as well. He played really good football when they needed him to. You mentioned Les Spencer. Great by that front seven. I thought Lindenberg and Henderson coming up, stepping in the box. You had the safeties flying down. They did not respect, without Will Pauling list Wisconsin, they did not respect Braden Locke and his ability to push the ball down the field. Yeah, and they stopped the run. A lot of good things happened for Wisconsin. It is tough because your schedule was brutal. It really was. Alabama in the out of conference. You have USC on the road. You have Oregon and Penn State. Right, those are games you're just going to be outclassed in, and you lost all of those. Um, and then obviously you lose to your rivals in Iowa and Nebraska and Minnesota. So it is obviously a huge disappointing year for them. But you also, like, you lost to an 8-4 team in Iowa. You lost to a 6-6 Nebraska team that was the best Nebraska team we've seen in a long time there. And then also this is a really good Minnesota football team you lost to as well as a couple of the ranked matchups. So yes, it sucks that you couldn't beat anyone you weren't supposed to beat, but it at the end of the day, like it's Wisconsin, right? Like it's the talent that was there. We saw the regression coming. You obviously didn't work out there with Phil Longo. It's just the quarterback getting hurt. It wasn't a great year. They have to figure out a lot of things in the offseason. I think, we'll see what happens with the coordinator position. We'll see what happens with the quarterback position and how they go schematically with Luke Fickell, but we'll see. I think Wisconsin fans are upset, deservingly so, but I will caution that be like, listen, it's going to take some time. Paul Chris left this place in a terrible position. They're going to have to recruit better than they have, and they're going to have to develop guys, which they need to start doing a little bit better. But for Minnesota, this is awesome. This is a huge win for them. 3 out of their 4, last 4 games against Wisconsin, they have won, which is the first time in a long time there for the Gophers. So very happy for them. The goal now is going to be retention. The goal now is going to be keep building on this offense performance. Obviously, you only get 1 year Brosmer, which sucks, but you got some young talent in that room, and hopefully you can continue to develop that and continue to move forward passing the football, because when they're at their best, they can do both. And they saw that today when Darius Taylor, had 32 carries, but he had over 440 yards. When he has over 100 yards, they're a good football team. So he did it, and they won.
Arizona State clinches themselves a trip to the Big 12 championship. They beat Arizona 49-7, 600 total yards of offense, 200-yard rushers, a 100-yard receiver. I mean, when I'm looking at this game and I'm watching it, Arizona was just drowning, man. They've just been drowning for weeks now. No Fita does not have a lot of help on that offensive line. They have no run game. Defensively, they are lost without Johnny Nansen and the talent that they had in that secondary in front seven last year. This was a very, very, very disappointing year for Arizona. And it was actually a team that I was very high on in the preseason. I leaned to the over, under what was 7.5 wins. And I thought that there was a good chance that they were going to
We,
exceed
we
that
picked that
total.
at 8. We picked that at 8, I
We
think.
picked it at 8. I thought there was a really good chance that they were going to go over that number. I just couldn't get myself to put money on it, right? Because there was a lot of change. There was a head coaching change. There was offensive line change. There was a lot of personnel change on the defensive side of the ball. But yeah, Arizona going into this offseason, they need to get that offensive coordinator hire right because you have talent there right now that, I mean, this was not good. This was not good. So I'm looking at this for Arizona State though on their side, and like this is a team that's ready to win the Big 12. They're not ready to win the national championship, but they're ready to win the Big 12. If they keep the ball on the ground with Cam Scadaboo, if Sam Levitt keeps holding on to the football and making good plays and big time throws, which he has done week in and week out these past few weeks, there is a really, really good chance. Arizona State, by the way, is favored in that game against Iowa State, which I agree with, by the way. Still determining whether or not I want to put that on the best bet, but I like Arizona State in that game against Iowa State. I think Arizona State is in year 2 of Kenny Dillingham. Who in their right mind thought that I was about to say what I'm about to say right now is Arizona State is one game away, and they're favored in that game to make it to the college football playoffs.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, for Arizona, we talked about them having to get out to a good start. Do not let Arizona State do what they have done to a lot of teams in the Big 12, and that is start fast and start early. And it wasn't even like crazy turnovers. Yeah, it was, you didn't quite get the fourth down conversion, the missed field goal, but that wouldn't have stopped the bleeding, though. Like, it was just Arizona State driving down the field, efficient, explosive plays, and just scoring at will, finishing in the red zone. 35 points at halftime, and that was the game. I don't have too much more else to add to it, other than when Scadaboo, like you said, when he's running the ball well, or they're actually committing to him running the ball because he always runs the ball well because he's freaking awesome. And then Levitt, taking care of the football. It's a dangerous team. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, Jordan Tyson's good to go. It sounds like he won't be for that Big 12 championship game. He has been dynamic for them as of late. But if you continue to play well defensive like you have, and you continue to take care of the football, yeah, you said it, man. It's a dangerous, dangerous team. And then all of a sudden, you're in the playoffs. Damn it, you're in the freaking playoffs. Kenny Dillingham, Coach of the Year, give it to me. He has to be. I mean, nobody gave him a chance. I didn't even think they'd win 5 games, and here they are at 10-2. Regardless of what happens next week, he deserves a ton of credit. You better give him an extension. You better give him resources to succeed, because even when he has limited ones, he has taken advantage of them. And for Arizona, yeah, you said it, man. A lot has to change, and change quickly, because Brent Bennon's back. Yes, good news, I think, for Arizona, but stuff has to change, and he has to change his best, and I hope he will, because there's talent there in that state. There's talent there on that roster. I know you got picked. I know you got a bad spot, but with Fafita and Conley and McMillan and some guys you had there returning, right, that were on that team from a year ago, and you couldn't quite get it done. It was tough. It was tough, but here we are, Arizona Wildcats, 4-8. Arizona State is now 10-2. It was a little revenge game from last year because you kind of got beaten down, a couple of nights ago. But yeah, here we are.
These are my notes, things that I typed verbatim, okay, into my notes preseason about their schedule draw. All right, I said, this schedule is brutal. Thank God they get Wyoming at home. That is the level, and it's not. I'm not finished, by the way. That's like the level that I thought the talent of this team had. Right, going to San Marcos is not going to be easy. Also, by the way, it ended up not being very easy. They don't get to draw themselves or Houston. That was the level of talent that I thought was on this football team, and here we are. Incredible job by Kenny Dillingham. Let's move on over to CUSA. Liberty travels to Sam Houston. Gosh, and we talked about this game. We wanted to cover this game because we thought that Jacksonville State was going to win, beat Western Kentucky, even though they weren't favored in that game, because this game was going to mean going to the CUSA championship, and it just stinks that it doesn't. But Hunter Watson, I thought, played well in this game. Ducker had 24 carries on the ground for 96 yards. He had a really nice season there on the ground, the big boy. And yeah, Caden Salter after this game, Liberty 8-3 to end the year, and it could have been 8-4, right? Because he had that one game canceled. I believe it was Appalachian State
App
game
State,
that got canceled
yeah,
because of the unfortunate disaster that happened there with the Hurricanes. And yeah, he was 12 of 35 in this game. 83 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Severe regression from him through the air, and you were obviously missing some talent, right? CJ Daniels gone. Um, so you were missing some talent there, but just yeah, very underachieving season for Liberty. I mean, for a team that was favored, it was like minus 150 for them to win the CUSA going into the season, and for them to come in fourth in the conference is pretty brutal.
No, not ideal at all. I know if Salter got hurt and he was banged up, and he had Berger coming in, who's obviously, not the guy right now for Liberty, and it was a big change. He gutted it out. Salter had a nice touchdown at the end, and unfortunately, you couldn't get the 2 point conversion. But yeah, you said it. Sam Houston State, what they did defensively was fantastic. They got after them. They stopped the run when they could, and Hunter Watson did enough. And honestly, it was Sam Houston that was kind of letting Liberty back in the game. You had the safety, right, which the just throw it at the feet of the running back. Don't throw it over his head, and you probably don't get that call. And then the interception, which gave Liberty a short field and a chance to close the gap before halftime. And then the missed field goal, and all, like it's been an up and down year for Sam Houston kicking the ball, but you get a win here. Obviously, it sucks because Jacksonville State did not close out like we thought they would, but and obviously Casey Keeler is gone up to Temple. But to me, this is one of the more attractive jobs. I think in the CUSA, I think the recruiting base is pretty good. It sounds like there's buy-in there. You had a very successful season, so I think there are resources to be had here to compete in this conference. Obviously, like they just did this year, a couple years removed from the FCS. But yeah, happy for the Bearcats because they deserve
Got to
it.
get that head coaching hire right, though. Right, Casey Keeler going over to Temple now. Got to get that hire right. Casey Keeler did some awesome things at Sam Houston. For one, he turned around, from last year to this year. It was an incredible turnaround. But what he did for them previous to Division One, I'm not sure everyone's familiar with the stuff that he was able to do there to get that program to where it was at a level where they were ready to go up to Division One and compete. So that, yeah, credit to him. Good luck to him at Temple, and nice season by Sam Houston for sure. Last game we're going to talk about, Texas going to College Station and absolutely handing Texas A&M their lunch and then some. I mean, on the ground, they could get whatever they wanted. Third down conversions, they were chalk. They were easy, right? Early in the game, you thought, oh, A&M, they had some nice stops there, and they drove down the field and just did not convert. You had the ball inside the 10 twice. You had 0 offensive points for the first time in Kyle Field since the 70s for a team that, you're directly competing with, right, for recruits. This whole time from the outside looking in, you're like, hey, look, that Texas team, they don't have to play in the SEC. And then in their first year in the SEC, they make it to the SEC championship and then beat you at your home field. Yeah, it was not a great look for Texas A&M this week. Overall, I think a good season for Mike Elko in his first year. I mean, if you look at other SEC coaches in their first years, the only people who had more wins than Mike Elko that are active coaches in the SEC in their first year were Kalen DeBoer and Brian Kelly. Uh, two pretty well tenured coaches themselves with pretty solid resumes. Whether or not and Brian Kelly won the SEC, in his first year, which is impressive. Kalen DeBoer, as frustrated as people are, I think it'll get better for them at Alabama. But yeah, I think good season for Mike Elko. Just frustrating because I think expectations were recalibrated when you were 7-1 and 5-0 in the SEC. So it does hurt A&M fans. I get it. It does hurt a lot. And for Texas, good job because this was the win on the schedule that you can hang your hat on and be like, this is a good win. On the road against a pretty solid team that's ranked, that was competing for a spot in the SEC championship. Because other than that, all you had heard all year long was, oh, our schedule this, our schedule that. You and I both took A&M to cover the spread in this game. You took Texas to win, though, straight up in a close game. And the score was 17-7, but man, it could have been worse. I know A&M didn't score on the 1 yard line, didn't score on the side of the 10 yard line that one time. Okay, yeah, I get that. Okay, so it could have been the other way. It could have been closer, even than it was, but at the same time, Texas dominated this game.
Yeah, to me, I think. Well, you obviously nailed it. You were there. You're pretty tapped into both these programs. But to me, the reason why I took Texas is I didn't think A&M had the dogs to close out a game and win key games, key plays when you need to, when it's going to be such small margins, even at home, and they couldn't. right? A couple fourth downs here and there,
Yep.
both ways, all basically went to Texas. Texas was 1-1 on fourth down, including, I believe, a touchdown on one of them. And then
It was the Arch Manning
Arch Manning
touchdown.
touchdown. And then Texas A&M 0 for 3, three brutal fourth down conversions. Obviously, the interception was brutal for Texas A&M as well early in the game, but Texas also handed you back opportunities to come back and win that game. The block punt as well was fantastic. To me, I look at Texas, I'm like, yeah, that offensive line is playing like that, and that defense is playing like that. Like, this is a very dangerous football team. But again, I do think Quinn Ewers and this passing game, and maybe the receivers you thought you might have had early in the season, maybe they're not quite as good as you thought they were. Bond was held without a catch. Golden, yeah, he had a couple nice, long catches, but that was really more schemed up. I think when you get into teams where there's really good depth all along every level of their defense, like it could be a problem for Texas. This A&M defensive line, one that we talked about being one of the better in college football, right? Let alone just the SEC, and it was disappointing. And you kind of got manheld, yes, by a bunch of NFL players as well, but you were also NFL players as well. You have NFL bodies, elite athletes, and hope and supposed to be elite schemes. And I was disappointed with what they were doing with their linebackers, what they were doing with light boxes, and just even personnel decisions on first and second down. I don't know, man. It was frustrating to watch A&M do that because you did think, yeah, they're here and there a couple plays. And for Marcel Reed, I mean, he's just limited right now. He just is. I think you have to come to that if you're an A&M. And I want to say this too is, I know I'm not tapping the program. I don't see that. I'm not, but I do like to follow them pretty closely in the SEC. I think if you want to win an SEC championship game next year or the year after, you're either going to need significant improvement from Reed, or that quarterback is not on the roster right now. And we'll see what happens in the portal. You've got some options already, and who knows what will happen later on. But I mean, with Reed missing guys, just guy after guy, making bad decisions, the fumbles, the interceptions. Yeah, a lot was put on him because you couldn't run the football with Daniels, and Owens was not fully healthy, and obviously Moss is gone. But I don't know. I think you need significant overhaul of your skill positions at A&M, and that offensive line too might need some to be reworked as well. But yeah, I think for Texas, this is a big win for them. I mean, huge win. I do, like you said, year one with Mike Elko, still successful. I think it will bear fruit. It already is in recruiting. I think it will continue to bear fruit. I think also, knowing like that taste, right, that was going around College Station, like we were there, it was a bitter one, right? I do think sometimes you need that to kick in the groin and start figuring things out, organizationally, funding wise, and maybe to realize, hey, we're not that close. We thought we were this close, and maybe we're not. We still need a couple more things to get to that spot. I think Elko's the guy to do it, and we'll see what happens.
That's going to do it for our Week 14 Rivalry Week recap. Make sure you're staying tuned for our conference championship previews. Make sure you're staying tuned for our bowl game coverage, our coaching carousel coverage, our transfer portal coverage. Maybe we'll get some stuff out about signing day, but honestly, there's a ton of stuff going on right now. So we'll see what we can do. If you guys want that, let us know in the comments. Let us know by email at theredshirtsophomore@gmail.com. Let us know by DMing us on Twitter at theredshirtsoph. But regardless, you should be liking this video if you like the content, and consider subscribing. Stick around. So, CD, anything for us on the way out?
Yeah, even in this time we've just been recording here, Zach Kitley, offensive coordinator from Texas Tech, just got hired to FAU. That's two coordinators now for Texas Tech, and that's two former
Yikes.
offensive coordinators from Western Kentucky getting big time jobs for them. How about our guy Tyson Helton down there? They have a big game too this week, so very interesting there. I like the hire for FAU as a 1,000 feet view, just like very quickly, instant reaction, but had to throw that in there because that's a big deal, and we'll see what happens going forward in the coaching carousel. So make sure you're subscribed because we'll be talking about all this stuff.
Absolutely. We'll see y'all in the next one.